Welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque, where we meet some of the important faces involved with films that tackle aspects of the Jewish experience. Today I'm joined by documentary filmmaker Beth Lane, whose film UnBroken explores the miraculous story of the 7 Weber siblings, ages 6 to 18, one of whom is her mother, who evaded certain capture and death during World War II. The children ultimately escaped Nazi Germany, relying solely on youthful bravado and the kindness of strangers following their mother's incarceration and murder at Auschwitz. This is Ms. Lane's feature directorial debut, and it is both a professional milestone and a personal quest to immortalize this incredibly personal story taken by her family over 70 years ago.
We were put in the back of the Schmidt's truck
He took us in the middle of the night out to the farm.
because he had heard they were going to come for us.
We were on a truck.
I was terrified. Everybody was terrified.
All it was a tarp on the outside.
But we were already registered to be shipped off to Auschwitz.
I never thought they would tell me their story,
We were 7 Jewish children who came over here together.
but one fragment at a time.
That's Mama.
They give me something to hold on to.
She put us into danger by doing what she was doing.
He kept telling her not to do it because she said, "You're going to get caught."
My memory of her is when she was taken away.
And she said, "It's all right. These people need to get out." You don't go through what he did in a camp and walk away emotionally whole. You're broken.
I guess there's just something about seeing original source documents that's so emotional.
After she was killed, my father said we had to go be baptized.
Alexander took all the children to Berlin. That would have been extremely dangerous.
My father said, "We gotta get out of here now."
All of the Soviet troops will go to Berlin, and fighting there was very, very cruel and very, very dangerous.
You learn to lie to survive.
Can you describe how you feel right now?
A little overwhelmed.
There is so much evil in the world that is always overcome by so much goodness.
Is courage something that can be learned, or are you born with it?
Und wenn der Mut nicht herausgefordert wird, dann weiß man ja
It
gar
is
nichts davon.
incumbent upon us to remember that the good always outweighs the evil.
Beth, welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
So what an extraordinary story that you tell. It's a personal story, and it's a story that you grew up with. Why did you decide to take this to film?
It is a story that I learned about when I was 6 years old, which is the same age that my mother was when she came to this country. But I also knew that I didn't know anything about it. So I can't really say that I grew up knowing the story because my mother had so few memories. She had 2 or 3 that she would recount, or if I would ask and inquire about them. But she really didn't have the memories, and I didn't meet my aunts and uncle for many years. She reunited with them much later in life, and that's when I started to put the puzzle pieces together. But why a film? I had scratched the surface writing about it in play form. I had written a one-person play, then a multi-person play, then went back to a one-person play, and it just didn't feel like it was for an audience. It felt more therapeutic for myself. And I had an experience in the summer of 2017 that was just one of those watershed moments where all of a sudden her entire journey and experience kind of went off in my head like a light bulb. I just said, if I don't tell it now, it will be lost forever.
Why? What happened?
My uncle and I had planned a trip to go back to Germany so I could see it through his eyes.
The family originally was from?
From Berlin.
From Berlin.
And quite tragically, he died, and my mother decided at that point in time that she wanted to go back to Germany for the first time ever since she had left in 1946. So we went and we visited the town historian, the town of Worin, where she was hidden.
Worin is where?
60 kilometers east of Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother and her siblings were hidden by two farmers, Paul and Arthur Schmidt, a simple Christian couple who used to store their produce crates in the basement of the apartment building where my mom and her family lived in Berlin.
So they had that relationship.
They had a very tangential relationship. In the Scheunenviertel where they lived, it was a very transient neighborhood.
Help us out. That's a neighborhood in Berlin.
Yes, and
okay.
It's near the Alexanderplatz.
Okay.
And it was not a Jewish ghetto of any kind, but it was a challenging neighborhood filled with all kinds of ladies of the night, if you will, and I don't want to say thievery, but there are some wonderful books about the Scheunenviertel that explains kind of the landscape. And this farmer and his wife would store their produce crates in the basement because they would sell their produce at the Alexanderplatz. My mother's mother, Lena, was the janitress of the building, and she also collected the rents for the landlord. When she was deported to Auschwitz, and then, well, I'm messing up my own timeline, but when she was deported to Auschwitz, the 7 siblings were also then taken by the Jewish community to the Jewish hospital in Berlin, and that was a collection point.
So let me just stop you for a moment. You're in effect, you're telling us that there was a process to protect children by the Jewish community of Berlin.
Well, I wouldn't call it protection at all.
Well, to at least hide them.
No.
No.
Not at all.
So then what was going on? Why did they send them to a hospital?
Because it was a collection point. It was a farce. It was a ruse. It was a collection point. Their names were then put on a manifest to go to Auschwitz. So when Arthur Schmidt found out about this, he was then able to get them, we tell the story in the film, I think, much more eloquently than I'm telling it to you right now. But they went to Worin. Anyway, so back to this moment where I decided to make the film. My mother and I decided to go back to Germany in the summer of 2017, and we were hosted by the town historians of this little tiny postage stamp town. And they invited a descendant of Arthur Schmidt to come and meet us. And it was in that moment that I realized if I don't tell this story now, it will be gone forever. And I felt that film would be absolutely the right medium to explore the Schmidt's point of view, the Weber point of view, my point of view, and I hope that people find that the way that we tell the story is the medium of film is just really the best one for, at least right in this moment.
In the film, you go step by step in terms of their journey, which was a very interesting approach. You are there, but you are there and it's all new to you, as much as it's also new to the viewer, which is an unusual approach. Why did you decide to go with that approach?
I mean, I'm an actress first and foremost.
Were you the actress in the one-woman show?
Yes, yes.
So you had actually acted out your mother's part in earlier?
No, I didn't do that because the show was never produced. I wrote the pieces, but I never produced them.
And you never acted in it?
Not in a way, not in a stage production, in readings of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so,
anyway, I'm sorry I pulled you off of that, but
thank you. But the journey for me, whenever I am acting in anything, the most important thing for me as an actor, and really for you as an audience member, is we have to share these discoveries in a moment together. Otherwise, you're just kind of like doing the best hits from your living room. The very, very best acting is when it's discovered right there in the moment. And it was important for me as a documentarian to allow my film crew to capture me discovering stuff. So if I had it all figured out beforehand, I'd be acting. There are one or two moments in there that are retakes. I'll never ever admit to which ones they are, but I'm a pretty good actor. But you know, you want to have the thrill of the discovery, I think. That to me is what is shared with the audience, and I think that that's why audiences are responding to this particular family story as beautifully as they are, really embracing the Weber siblings, because we're all discovering these things together.
7 siblings who decide, because your grandfather tells them to, their father, stay together, stick together. Mm-hmm. That's how you will survive.
Yes.
And they somehow never leave each other. And there they are, step by step. And it's not as if they got on the boat and they went to the United States. That was not happening. And we don't want to give away the full story. We want the audience to see this film, but those steps, so in effect, from this hiding, then what? Then the Russians were coming.
Well, yes, and so those plot points, those details, they are laid out quite beautifully in the film.
Yes, they are.
And so for me as the filmmaker, what was so exciting was to try and figure out what those steps were and how that happened, how many upstanders along the way had to be complicit in their survival. And,
Talk about that a little bit.
I mean, you know, this idea of, you know, for me, when I look at like the seminal films that are my true north, what were my, you know, guiding lights? Of course, you look at Shoah, and you look at something like Shoah, where Claude Lanzmann brilliantly reveals how complicit the average human was in the horrific atrocities that took place at that time. And so when you have a master like that creating a film like that, it's so inspiring to a newbie like me. And I just said, well, let's do the opposite. Let's discover the complicity of the upstanders, the people that absolutely said, I will be an upstander, I will do the right thing no matter what. And that's what I was trying to unearth.
Were there incidents along the way where you found that there was someone who just simply stood by and did nothing, or may have even done some of the bad stuff, or just you kept coming across good and people in support?
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that before. I like that question. I think I wasn't hunting for it, so I didn't really come across it, and I've never scratched at this. We are told that my mother's mother, Lena, was reported by some neighbors. She had been arrested many times, but her final deportation, we're told, was because some neighbors turned her in. I would know how to go about trying to find out who they were, but of course we would never ever know. They're long deceased. A piece of research that we filmed that's not in the movie, because you only get, you know, how much time, but I went to the Allied Forces Museum in Berlin, and we discovered phone books, and we found the listings of the people that actually lived in their building. And I suppose I could do a deep dive there and try and find, okay, who turned in my birth grandmother, but that's not my journey, and I don't know what that would do for me. I don't need to confront the descendants of those families. You know, they're not responsible for whatever those people did.
So instead you focus on the Schmidts.
Absolutely, I focus on the heroes.
Who risked their lives.
Yes, yes.
I mean, you were caught hiding Jews. It was over.
No question about it.
And then you even went so far as to recommend their inclusion at Yad Vashem.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. It's
a beautiful moment in the film.
Oh, thank you. In 2008, we went to Yad Vashem as a family. My father took all of us, his wife, and they invited my mother to join us on the trip. My brother, my sister, all of our kids, our spouses. And that was the first time that we really took a look at whether or not Lena's name had been included in the lists that Yad Vashem has of the murdered. that began the process. My mother came back from that trip and spoke to her brother, my uncle Alphonse, about it. And Alphonse was just a marvelous scientist. He was a physicist. And so he really did the deep digging in the archives to try and get enough information to recommend that Arthur and Paula Schmidt be honored as righteous among the nations. It's a very arduous process, as I'm sure you probably know.
One male with 6 female siblings.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so that application process took many, many years. They were commended in 2015, but the ceremony took place in 2017, unfortunately after my uncle Alphonse had passed away. But it was a remarkable ceremony. And when we were there was press crawling absolutely everywhere. And I remember turning to Irina Steinfeld, who at that time was the director of the Gardens of the Righteous. And incidentally, Irina was one of Claude Lanzmann's assistants or producers, or, it's just, full circle. But I asked Irina, I said, do you always have this much press at these events? I mean, this is, Yad Vashem's been around for a while. And she said, no, what's remarkable about this story is that it was a German couple who hid them. And in the 27,000 names, at least in 2007, that are on the granite walls there, Arthur and Paula are only number 600 of German rescuers. And that's that's a very small number if you think about it. So that's why the press was there. Because the press had a wide reach and articles were being printed both in Israel and in Germany, somebody read the German article and called up her girlfriend, historian and writer Anna Andlauer, and said, hey Anna, you've got to read about this family because I think they're in your book. Well, Anna had written a book that included a paragraph about my family, about my mom and her siblings. So the next thing you know, we're on the phone trying to figure this out. And lo and behold, Anna arranged for us to then film in Indersdorf at the cloister. And she's become a deeply rooted part of the fabric of our archival research and our story. And one thing just leads to another. It just never ends. The kinds of research that comes out of the woodworks when you have ceremonies like Yad Vashem. I could go on and on about how many synchronistic moments like that have happened, but the embrace that we've received from the community at large has been tremendous.
You mentioned the press. In the film, you show a press clipping where your aunts and uncles and mom arrive in the United States. So you did not even know this story until late. And was that sort of a unique discovery, or was it something in your mother's scrapbook, or?
In 1996, let me get this right. Yes, in 1996, my mother hosted a 50th anniversary of the siblings emigrating from Germany to America. So they celebrate that anniversary of coming here and starting a new life. So the 50th anniversary included all of the siblings, all of their children, and if there were grandchildren at that time, the grandchildren. We were all still pretty young then. I had just given birth to twins, so I had 3 little ones. And at that ceremony, my cousin Lynn did a remarkable thing. She did make 7 scrapbooks for all the siblings. And there were lots of newspaper clippings in those scrapbooks. And we would talk about them. My mother had some memories were starting to come back. She does remember being kind of this poster child in 1946. They arrived. They are the only family of 7 Jewish siblings known to have survived together and emigrated together. They're recognized by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and so their picture hangs in the last gallery. They were front page news. And I think the U.S. soaked it up at that time. So going back to
what year was this?
That was 1946, May 21st.
And there weren't that many Jews who were allowed to come to this country.
No, not at all. They came over on the SS Marine Flasher, not a cruise. And they were literally on the cover of, I mean, when I went to do the research for UnBroken, and I was working with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, we kept coming up with more clips, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is just crazy. Des Moines, Iowa picked up the story. I mean, all different kinds of outlets were picking up this story.
In the course of the film, going from place to place, one of the remarkable stories that you tell is, here they are in this farm, in danger any moment of being discovered. And then they learn that the Russians are closing in, and they run off of all places back to Berlin.
Yes.
And we read about Berlin in those last months, last days, of how awful it was to be there. Why did they go back to Berlin, and what happened there? Again, I don't want to give away the story of but
I mean, I think, you make these decisions in a nanosecond. And is it the right decision or isn't it? Who knows? Worin is east of Berlin, so it's on the way to Poland. Well, maybe you don't really want to go to Poland at that time. You certainly don't want to go to Russia. Everything was happening down in Hungary, horrible, horrible atrocities in Hungary, so you're not going to go south. Where are you going to go north? They still had an apartment in Berlin. So they went to Berlin, and it's amazing they even made it to Berlin. Just extraordinary, because
the bombings and everything else.
They were 10 kilometers from the Battle of Seelow Heights, the front line. They probably would have been better off just staying right there in Worin, but who knows? Who knows? And many, many, many things happened once they got back to Berlin, but we'll save that for the movie.
Great. When they arrived in the United States, 7 siblings, I can imagine it was not easy to find a home, someone who would take care of 7 children. Now, one of the things about cinema that I'm sure you want to continue to happen is the surprises that you lay out in your film. But you've already told us that you didn't know about this, and that your mother was separated from her siblings?
My mother, all 7 were placed in foster care.
By the
Jewish Children's Bureau of Chicago. And this is tragic. It's heartbreaking. Sure, would be difficult to house 7 children together. They could have chosen to keep them all together in an orphanage. Why those choices happened at that time, I can't say. And my mother's family, her foster family, was abusive, physically abusive. So she was removed from that situation, thank goodness, and she was adopted by my grandparents, Roz and Josh Spiegel. And for a while, they were able to maintain Mom's visits with her birth siblings, but it wasn't going well, and she wasn't acclimating well to her new home. So the Jewish Children's Bureau of Chicago's social workers advised my grandparents to sever ties. And it was how my mom was able to move forward and lead an incredible life. My grandparents were very educated people, very artistic. My grandfather was a neurosurgeon. And they gave her every privilege that she possibly could have had: private school, dance lessons, vacations, things like that. It took many, many years for her to be able to reach back out to her siblings. And not because my grandparents ever stopped her. They always said, if you ever want to know about where your siblings are or anything, just ask, and we'll make the relationships happen for you again. But I think my mother felt a tremendous loyalty to my grandparents, and also just a protection for herself too, of wanting to move forward with a new life. It was very difficult on everybody, that separation. And happily, when they did reunite 40 years later, which we show in the film, it's spectacular. And they each had their own individual relationships with my mom and she with them. And I'm happy to say that at this point in time, here we are, the film is out, it's released, and all of my siblings, but all of my cousins are very grateful to have so many more of the puzzle pieces put together. Because all 7 of them are survivors, they're Holocaust survivors, they're refugees, they're displaced people, but that's not how they walk in the world. And it wasn't what they led with in how they raised their families or how they contributed to society. So now I think everybody's learning a lot more about a story that we all knew about, but we all knew we didn't know much about it.
The puzzle has been pieced together. Let's take a look at a clip from the film UnBroken.
They asked me if I wanted to be adopted. They were good to me. Why wouldn't I say, yes, I'll be adopted? I didn't know any different.
Her caseworker and the officials of the JCB thought it best that all contacts between Bela and the remainder of the family be terminated.
I didn't see her for years. I finally, by accident, I saw her standing there waiting for a bus or some drive, I don't know. But I walked up to her and I asked her, I said, "Do you remember me? I'm your sister." Well, evidently I freaked her out because years had passed, you know, and she, I think, put everything behind her.
I looked at her and I said, no, I felt very funny because I couldn't remember her name. But I said something about, I don't want to be sent back. I had that instinctive feeling, oh my God, she's coming. I know it's part of my family and I don't want to be sent back to Germany.
That was our life. And I understood that. The fear didn't go away overnight. The fear stayed with you.
It was difficult. So for me, it was the right decision.
Your grandfather, your mother's father, because of the American immigration policy, which was they didn't want, we, the United States of America, just didn't want that many Jews here. It's very clear. And here he was. You were able to come, you meaning your mother and her siblings were able to come, and he was kept back. And only later was he able to arrive in the United States. But by that time, the family had pretty much, you talk about it in that film. Was that difficult for you to piece that into the puzzle?
No, that piece of the puzzle, I think, was one of the clearer moments because they were able to, those details were all fresh in their memories. Those were not details that I think emotionally they needed to kind of put in the back corner. My birth grandfather, Alexander, has his own very interesting story arc. He had wanderlust. He wanted to leave Germany forever. His father died in either 1919 or 1921. And at that time, Alexander, he tried to move to Paris. France sent him back to Germany. He tried to move to London. England sent him back to Germany. He was selling parasols and walking sticks, which was the family business, down in Hungary, and that's when he met Lena and fell in love with her. And when it was time for him to come to America in 1946, he thought he had all of his paperwork in order. We have a telegram saying the children left on the SS Marine Flasher, and there's a telegram, it's in the movie. I'm coming in 10 days' time, the apartment is closed up. and he couldn't get out of Germany. So whether it was the US not allowing him to have a visa, or whether it was Germany not allowing him to leave, I don't know. But it took 10 years for his children to be able to save enough money to then bring over 4 people. He had remarried, had a stepdaughter, and a new child. So it was a very complicated journey for him to actually leave Germany and come to America and become an American citizen.
You pieced together this puzzle. You are second generation. Your mother is a survivor, very much so.
Yeah.
What about the intergenerational trauma that I imagine must have very much been there for you?
I think making the film, making UnBroken, has been my opportunity to try and really look at that square in the eye and talk to it. I've never felt that I had intergenerational transfer of trauma. I was raised in a very Norman Rockwellian town of Wilmette, Illinois. I went to fabulous public schools. I went to college. I had a wonderful family, grandparents on both sides, tons of cousins. Went to summer camp. Parents took me to the opera, the ballet. You know, I had a great childhood. So I had nothing to complain about. But I wonder, why am I an actor? What is it that's always made me want to become an actor or step inside other people's shoes? And there's something latent inside that makes you take on a career that, quite frankly, has no guarantee. You're banging your head against a wall 90% of the time. You're unemployed 99% of the time.
The film took you how many years?
7 years. You know, and so I think that for me, the intergenerational transfer of trauma has always been addressed through the arts, whether I was aware of it or not. And I'm just a person who, no matter what, makes lemonade out of lemons. So this opportunity right now has allowed me to actually embrace the actual trauma aspect of it, which is very real. There's no question that there are things in my life that I can do better as a person. I can be kinder, I can be more patient, I can be so many things. And I've often wondered, like, why do I go from 0 to 10 over the napkin? Like, you know, whatever the stupid little things in life. Why does that door ajar bother me so much? And I'm kind of like exploring how much of that is from that piece of trauma or not. Maybe I'm just human and we all get irritated by the silly napkin or the chair askew, but there's something in there, and I am grateful that I have this world of the arts to be able to explore those ideas.
So you've talked about how difficult it was to make this film. You've created the Weber Family Arts Foundation to not only produce this film, but hopefully produce other works in the arts. As we conclude, just tell us briefly about the foundation and your hopes.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. I think when it's your own family story, you want to be so careful about how you incentivize the people around you to help you make the story. There's a lot of fundraising involved all the time when you're dealing with documentaries and independent documentaries. And so I was never comfortable with the idea of exploiting my family or even profiting from their story. So it was very important for me to establish a nonprofit foundation in their name. And when we turn a profit, which we will, the profits will go to the foundation to continue to combat anti-Semitism and bigotry and hate of all kinds.
Wonderful.
Specifically through the arts across any medium. So whether it's poetry or dance or opera or filmmaking, but also specifically by sharing stories of hope. And so UnBroken is our inaugural project. It's our debut project. But I hope that we can then give seed money to other artists one day so that they can tell their stories of hope. That's my dream.
Well, I hope you fulfill that dream.
Thank you. Thank you.
The film is UnBroken. It's a film by Beth Lane, co-written with Aaron Safin, and it's a film that you must make an effort to see. You can see it streaming over the next several months, and just what an amazing, amazing film. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here.